On paper, a bridge or tunnel linking Long Island and Connecticut could erase hours of gridlock and bind two states in just 20 minutes. A $55 billion mega project promising to rewrite the rules of how millions move through the Northeast. Yet after nearly a century of studies, political battles, and collapsed blueprints, the game-changing crossing remains out of reach. Why does this vision keep coming back? And what keeps stopping it every single time? By the late 1960s, the idea of bridging Long Island Sound was already a familiar headline. New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller threw his weight behind a series of ambitious proposals, from eastern stretches near Orient Point to a western crossing linking Oyster Bay and Rye. Plans called for multi-mile spans, promising to link the growing suburbs of Long Island directly to New England. But as blueprints piled up, so did the obstacles. Environmental laws were tightening. Communities on both shores organized against the disruption, and Wall Street doubted the toll revenues could cover the massive debt. In June 1973, Rockefeller canceled the Rye to Oyster Bay Bridge, capping a decade of study and debate with a single signature. The Tri-State Advisory Committee that followed would later call a sound bridge neither desirable nor necessary, and it urged ferry expansions instead. Yet the vision never disappeared. In the 1990s, private developers revived the dream with glossy pitches for a cross-sound tunnel, this time a tolled highway beneath the water, sometimes with a rail line attached. Each cycle followed a pattern: initial excitement, consultant studies, and then the familiar roadblocks. Costs ballooned, environmental and neighborhood opposition mounted, and neither New York nor Connecticut was willing to risk public money. By the early 2000s, another round of proposals had quietly faded. For commuters stuck in endless traffic, the promise of a direct link across the Sound remained a kind of urban legend, always just out of reach, always returning with a new name, a new study, or a new champion. The question lingers: can this cycle ever be broken? Or is the mega bridge destined to remain a vision on paper? Plans for a Long Island Sound crossing now center on three main routes, with the Port Jefferson to Bridgeport span, about 14 to 15 miles, receiving the most attention. Other corridors, such as Oyster Bay to Stamford or Smithtown to New Haven, appear in some studies but lack the same momentum. The engineering menu is straightforward: a full bridge, a tunnel beneath the seabed, or a hybrid that combines both. Bridge designs call for 6 lanes, emergency shoulders, and a high central span to allow ships to pass. Tunnel options include bored tubes or prefabricated segments set below the water, while hybrids like the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel use artificial islands to transition between bridge and tunnel, preserving shipping lanes and limiting shoreline impact. Proponents frame the project as a solution to the region's chronic gridlock. The current reality is stark. A drive from Long Island to southwestern Connecticut often means a 2-hour detour through New York City, with peak times stretching to 3 hours. Recent studies drawing on Google and INRIX data show that peak trips from Port Jefferson to Bridgeport or from Huntington to Stamford can take anywhere from 90 to 150 minutes. Supporters claim a direct crossing could shrink the water portion to just 20 minutes, promising a dramatic cut in total travel time. Private advocates such as Stephen Shapiro argue that this link would not only speed up commutes, but also connect two major economies, expand job opportunities, and strengthen emergency response. The blueprint is bold, but its promises depend on whether these projections hold up under closer scrutiny. Sticker shock has become a defining feature of the Long Island Sound crossing debate. The most recent feasibility study placed the cost between $31 billion and $55 billion, a range that reflects not only the sheer scale of the project, but also the hard lessons of past megaprojects. Marine structures, whether bridge pylons, tunnel bores, or artificial islands, account for the largest share, often 25 to 35% of the total. Approach highways and interchanges on both shores add billions more, especially where land is already densely developed. Environmental mitigation, from eelgrass restoration to water quality monitoring, introduces further complexity and expense. Contingency allowances, sometimes as high as 50%, are built in to guard against unknowns beneath the Sound's surface. Cost analysts point to the Boston Big Dig, where original projections quadrupled, ending more than 400% over budget. With every new estimate, planners are forced to reckon with the reality that American infrastructure often costs far more than initial headlines suggest. The $55 billion figure is not just a headline, it is a warning, shaped by decades of overruns and the unpredictable nature of building across water. Beneath the surface of Long Island Sound, the real test begins. The seabed here is anything but uniform, with layers of soft mud, shifting sands, and ancient glacial till stretching across the corridor and hiding pockets of unpredictable ground. For engineers, every mile brings a new puzzle. Foundations for a bridge must reach down through unstable layers, sometimes 30 to 60 meters below the water, before hitting bedrock sturdy enough to hold massive pylons. Each new soil condition means recalculating designs, adding risk, and driving up cost. Tunnel options bring their own hazards. Bored tunnels, carved by giant machines deep below the seabed, demand stable ground and thick cover to keep water out. Yet in the Sound, bedrock can drop away without warning, forcing tunnel alignments to dip or curve and complicating ventilation and emergency access. Immersed tube tunnels require dredging trenches for prefabricated segments, a process that churns up sediments and can disrupt marine life. Hybrid designs that combine bridges and tunnels with artificial islands multiply the challenges. The Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel showed this approach can work, but it comes at a price, including construction across busy shipping lanes, constant maintenance, and the ever-present threat of storms. Every design choice here is a trade-off, shaped by unpredictable terrain, dense marine traffic, and the demands of one of America's busiest estuaries. Engineering ambition meets stubborn geology, and that collision is one of the main reasons costs rise and timelines stretch. Long Island Sound is more than a watery gap between two states. It is an estuary that supports eelgrass beds, oyster reefs, and a web of marine life. Scientists warn that large-scale construction could threaten these fragile habitats. Eelgrass in particular is highly sensitive to light and sediment. Even temporary increases in turbidity from pile driving or dredging can smother these underwater meadows, which serve as nurseries for fish and invertebrates. Shellfish beds also stand at risk from construction noise and suspended sediments, with local fisheries already under pressure from pollution and warming waters. The experience of the Øresund Bridge between Denmark and Sweden offers a cautionary parallel. There, years of environmental monitoring and mitigation became as complex as the engineering itself. Eelgrass was transplanted, water flows were modeled, and long-term studies were mandated. On land, the resistance is just as fierce. Residents in towns such as Port Jefferson and Bridgeport voice fears about increased traffic, constant noise, and potential property seizures. Many worry that new approach highways would carve through established neighborhoods, driving up truck volumes and erasing the quiet coastal character. For some, the promise of economic growth feels distant compared to the threat of losing what makes their community unique. These combined ecological and social concerns form a regulatory barrier that no blueprint can ignore. Connecticut's position on the Long Island Sound crossing is now unambiguous. On October 14, 2025, Governor Ned Lamont publicly ruled out any state funding, calling the plan incredibly complicated and supremely expensive. Without Connecticut's support, the project is effectively stalled. Even the most optimistic toll-based public and private partnership models fall short. Recent studies show tolls would cover only about 22% of the debt service, leaving a massive funding gap. The Mario Cuomo Bridge, completed in 2018, was financed through a blend of toll-backed bonds and state guarantees. But even that $4 billion project required years of political wrangling. A $55 billion sound crossing would demand far more. It would require joint legislation, multi-decade commitments, and ironclad agreements between two states that have never shared a clear vision. For now, the political will simply isn't there. The most probable scenario is a return to the study cycle. More consultant reports, more public hearings, and no shovels in the ground. With Connecticut's funding off the table and political momentum stalled, agencies are likely to focus on incremental upgrades, including widening bottlenecks on I-95, improving ferry service, and targeting rail reliability. These alternatives may not offer the drama of a mega bridge, but they are far more achievable in the current climate. To ground this analysis, 6 local voices, commuters, engineers, planners, and environmental advocates, will appear on camera, each offering a brief perspective on what is at stake. For viewers seeking deeper details, a resource card at the end will list key agencies, including the New York State Department of Transportation, the Connecticut Department of Transportation, the United States Army Corps of Engineers, and the Metropolitan Planning Organizations, along with direct links to the most recent studies and public documents. Right now, a direct link between Long Island and Connecticut remains just out of reach, stalled by cost, politics, and divided will. As Northeast corridors buckle under pressure, the question is no longer just what is possible, but what leaders and communities are willing to risk for the future. What is your take?